The night sky burned red as explosions lit the horizon. The ground shook with every blast and smoke rolled across the ruined valley. Corpses of machines and soldiers lay scattered, both human and alien. The air smelled of fire, metal, and blood. Sergeant Daniel Cole ran through the chaos, his rifle clutched tight, his armor cracked and smeared with dust. He had been fighting for hours, yet the battle showed no sign of ending. The humans were retreating, the alien forces pushing harder. Every instinct told him to fall back to save himself. But then, he heard it, a soft cry, almost lost under the roar of war. He turned his head and saw her. An alien girl, no older than 20 in human years, lying near a broken wall. Her body was twisted, her leg bleeding, her arm trembling as she tried to crawl. Her silver hair was stained with dirt, her skin pale and glowing faintly under the burning sky. Her eyes, large and violet, stared at him in fear and pain. Daniel froze. She was the enemy. Every soldier was taught to kill on sight. And yet, she looked so fragile, so helpless, not like the monsters from the propaganda posters, not like a warrior, just a girl fighting to breathe. Another explosion shook the ground, dust raining down over her body. Her voice broke into a whisper. Please. It was weak, almost lost, but Daniel heard it clearly, and in that single moment he made his choice. He threw his rifle over his back and ran toward her. Bullets whizzed past him, metal shards cut his cheek, but he didn't stop. He dropped too, his knees sliding beside her. Her body was shaking, her lips pale, her breath shallow. Don't move, he muttered, his voice steady but his heart racing. He checked her wounds quickly, blood flowing too fast from her leg. If he left her, she would die in minutes. If he carried her, he might die in seconds. But his hands did not hesitate. He lifted her into his arms, surprised by how light she was. Her head fell against his chest, her breath ragged. He tightened. His grip stood up and began to run. The battlefield erupted around them. Flashes of gunfire lit the smoke. Shadows of soldiers clashed in the distance. Daniel ran between burning machines, leaping over rubble, each step heavy with the weight of his armor and the girl in his arms. Her faint whimper reached his ears, making him run faster. Behind him, a group of alien soldiers spotted movement and shouted. Lasers cut through the air, one beam missing his head by inches. He ducked low, sprinting through a collapsed trench, his breath burning in his chest. Hold on, he whispered, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. Her body felt weaker with every second, her blood staining his armor. He could feel her heart beating faintly against his chest, slowing, fading. A fear he had never known filled him, fear not for himself but for her. He pressed her closer as if his strength could keep her alive. He spotted a half-broken bunker ahead, half buried under dirt and stone. If he could reach it, maybe they could hide. He pushed harder, his legs screaming, lungs burning. He burst inside, the bunker dark and silent, the smell of dust filling the air. He lowered her gently onto a slab of stone, his hands shaking, her violet eyes fluttered open, staring up at him with a mix of terror and confusion. You're human, she whispered, her voice cracked. Daniel pressed his hand against her wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Yeah, and you're lucky I don't care about that right now, he muttered. Her lips curved faintly, almost like the shadow of a smile, before her eyes rolled shut. Panic rushed through him. He tore a strip of cloth from his uniform and wrapped it around her leg. Pulling tight, his fingers worked fast, his mind screaming that it wasn't enough. Every second, the battle outside grew louder, closer. But inside that bunker, the only sound he heard was her shallow breathing. He sat back, sweat dripping down, his face staring at her. She was an enemy, yes, but also someone's daughter, someone's child. She was more than a soldier, and he had chosen to protect her. Why? He didn't know, but deep in his chest he felt something shift, something he couldn't explain. Another explosion shook the ground, dust falling from the ceiling. Daniel looked toward the entrance, then back at the alien girl. He whispered to himself, "What the hell have I done?" Yet even as he said it, he knew the answer. He had done the only thing his heart allowed him to do. He had saved her. And now, for better or worse, their fates were bound together. The war still raged outside, But inside that broken shelter, a new story had begun, one neither of them could have ever expected. The silence inside the ruined bunker was heavy, broken only by the sound of shallow breathing. Daniel sat against the cracked wall, his rifle across his knees, his eyes fixed on the alien girl lying on the stone slab. Her wound was bound, but blood still seeped through the cloth. Her skin was pale, almost glowing in the dim light. Her silver hair spread like spilled starlight across the dusty floor. He should have left her. Every thought in his head told him. So she was an enemy, and saving her meant betrayal to his people. But every time he looked at her, he couldn't move. There was something fragile, almost innocent about her. He felt like walking away would be the same as killing her with his own hands. Hours passed. The battle outside moving further into the valley. Explosions faded into distant echoes, and the screams of soldiers turned into silence. The bunker shook now and then as the ground trembled from faraway blasts. But for the moment, they were hidden safe, or as safe as they could be. The alien girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Her violet gaze met his, confused and wary. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, her voice broken and faint. Why help me? Daniel leaned forward, pressing his hand against the bandage to stop the bleeding. Because you would have died, he answered simply, his voice low and steady. Her eyes narrowed, mistrust still burning in them. You're human enemies, she whispered. Daniel gave a faint laugh, though there was no humor in it. Yeah, that's what they tell us, he muttered. But I don't kill the helpless. She blinked slowly, staring at him as though she didn't understand. For a long moment there was only silence. Finally, she closed her eyes again, too weak to argue. Her breath steadied, though her body still trembled from pain and exhaustion. Daniel sat back, exhaling deeply. He took off his cracked helmet and set it aside, wiping sweat from his brow. He checked the bunker, searching through old crates and broken supplies. Most were useless, rusted cans, shattered equipment. But he found a small medkit, half empty. His hand shook as he cleaned her wound, applied pressure patches, and replaced the blood-soaked cloth with fresher bandages. Every time she winced, guilt twisted inside him. He didn't know why it mattered so much, but it did. Night fell, the world outside dark and silent. Daniel lit a small glow stick, its soft blue light filling the bunker. The alien girl opened her eyes again, her gaze softer now, though still cautious. She studied him as if trying to read his soul. Her lips parted and she whispered, "My name." "Liara?" Daniel paused, then nodded. "Daniel," he replied, his voice firm but gentle. For the first time, her expression changed. She looked almost relieved, as though saying their names created a fragile bridge between them as the hours dragged on. Daniel shared his rations. He broke a protein bar in half, holding it out to her. She hesitated, staring at the food suspiciously. "It's not poison," he said dryly, taking a small bite himself to prove it. She blinked, then slowly took the piece, nibbling at it with trembling hands. Her face softened as the taste reached her tongue. Strange to her, but life-saving. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible. Daniel gave a faint nod, pretending not to care. But inside, he felt warmth rise in his chest. Outside, the night grew colder, and the wind howled through cracks in the stone. Liara shivered, curling into herself, her thin clothing no match for the freezing air. Daniel sighed, pulling off his tattered cloak and draping it over her. She looked up at him, eyes wide with surprise. "You'll freeze," she murmured. "I'll manage," he replied, sitting back against the wall, arms crossed. But when she tugged the cloak closer, a faint smile touched her lips. For the first time since he found her, she seemed less like an enemy, and more like someone who trusted him, even if only a little. The night stretched long, and Daniel fought to stay awake, his rifle ready at his side. He knew patrols might come searching, human or alien, and either side would call him a traitor. If they found him with her, his choice could mean death not just for him but for her too. Yet as he looked at Liara resting under his cloak, he knew he wouldn't undo his decision. He had carried her through fire, blood, and death. Turning back was no longer possible. She shifted in her sleep, whispering in her own language, words he didn't understand, but her tone was soft, almost like prayer. Daniel listened, wondering what she was saying. Was she calling for her family? Begging her gods? Or maybe thanking him? The glow stick dimmed, shadows filling the bunker again. Daniel leaned his head back against the wall, his eyes heavy. Before sleep claimed him, he glanced one last time at Liara. She was still breathing, her chest rising gently, her face calmer than before. For the first time in days, Daniel felt a strange sense of peace. He whispered to himself, "Rest. You're safe now." And as the world outside burned with war, inside that hidden shelter, a fragile bond began to form. A bond that neither human nor alien command could ever have predicted. The morning came slowly, creeping through the cracks of the broken bunker. A faint golden light touched the stone walls and dust floated in the air like drifting ash. Daniel woke with a start, his rifle in his hands before his eyes had fully opened. For a second he forgot where he was until he saw her. Liara, the alien girl, lay curled under his cloak, her chest rising and falling in weak rhythm. Her violet eyes blinked open at the sound of his movement. There was fear in her gaze, at first, but when she recognized him, the fear softened into weariness. "You stayed," she whispered, her voice rough. Daniel lowered his weapon and gave a tired smile. "You expected me to leave?" Her lips curved faintly, though pain made her expression tighten. "I thought humans cared only for themselves," she said slowly, as though every word cost her effort. Daniel tore open a ration pack and handed her water. "Guess you met the wrong kind of humans," he muttered. He crouched beside her, checking the wound on her leg. The bandages were soaked again. The bleeding slowed but not stopped. He worked carefully, removing the cloth and pressing new patches from the med kit. Liara winced, but did not pull away, her hands gripping the edge of the stone slab. "You've done this before," she whispered, watching him. Daniel shrugged. "A soldier learns quick or he dies." Her eyes lingered on him, studying his face as if she was trying to read something deeper. "You fight, but you heal too," she said softly. Strange for a human warrior. For a long while, silence hung heavy between them, broken only by the sound of his hands working and her shallow breaths. When he tied the final knot of cloth, she sighed, a sound of relief, then her voice dropped lower, almost like she was confessing to herself. "You risked everything for me, but you don't even know who I am." Daniel raised an eyebrow, sitting back against the wall. "You're Liara." "That's enough for me," he said simply. Her eyes widened slightly, as though she didn't expect such an answer. "No," she said, her tone sharper. "You don't understand. I am not just Liara." Daniel leaned forward, sensing the change in her voice. "What do you mean?" She closed her eyes, her pale fingers brushing the bandages on her leg as if grounding herself. "My blood is hunted," she whispered. "I am daughter of House Valeth, one of the last noble families of my people." Daniel frowned, unfamiliar with the name. "So you're royalty?" he asked, confused. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Some would call it that. Others would call me a target." The words sank into the air like a heavy stone. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, trying to process. He had not just saved some random alien girl. He had carried a symbol, a name powerful enough to draw armies. "You're telling me," he muttered, "that the entire war outside would get worse if they knew you were alive?" Liara's eyes glistened, her voice almost breaking. "Yes. If my enemies find me, they will use me. If my people find me, they will force me to return, even if it kills me. Either way, I cannot go back." Daniel stared at her, trying to steady his thoughts. She had trusted him with this, a secret that could end both their lives. He should have been angry. He had already risked everything, and now it was even more dangerous. But when he looked at her, lying pale and broken yet still defiant, something inside him hardened. He had made his choice the moment he picked her up from the battlefield, and he wasn't going to turn away. Now, you're safe here, he said firmly, his voice carrying a weight she had not heard before. No one's taking you while I'm still breathing. Her eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. You would defy your own kind. For me? Daniel gave a faint, humorless laugh. I already have. For a moment she only stared at him, her chest rising and falling faster. Then she whispered, almost like a confession, You don't understand what you've done, Daniel. My secret is not just about bloodlines. Her voice trembled and her hand drifted toward her stomach, pressing lightly, protectively. I carry something else, she whispered, eyes lowering. Something they cannot know about. Daniel's breath caught in his chest, his gaze locked on her. The air between them grew heavy, filled with questions he could not yet ask. But before he could speak, a distant rumble shook the bunker. The war outside had not ended. It was drawing closer again. He tightened his grip on his rifle, his eyes flicking to the entrance. Whatever her secret was, he knew one thing. It had just made their fight to survive even harder. He looked back at Liara, her pale fingers still resting over her stomach, her violet eyes shimmering with fear and determination. He wanted to demand answers, but he held back. She had chosen to trust him once. She would tell him more when the time came. For now he only whispered, Then we protect it, together. Liara stared at him, shocked by the certainty in his voice. And for the first time since the war began, she felt something strange inside her chest. Hope. Fragile but alive. The rumble outside grew louder, soldiers' voices echoing. Faintly through the ruins, Daniel gritted his teeth, shifting closer to her side, his rifle ready. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain. He wasn't letting go, not of her and not of the secret she carried. The bunker walls shook again, dust falling like rain from the cracks above. The sound of soldiers echoed outside, boots striking stone, voices barking orders in alien tongue and human commands. Daniel knew the shelter would not stay hidden much longer. He glanced at Liara, who sat propped against the wall, her pale hand still pressed protectively against her stomach, her violet eyes clouded with fear. They're coming closer, Daniel whispered. Checking his rifle, the weapon's power was nearly drained. Only a few shots left, he cursed under his breath, then turned back to her. If we stay here, we die, he said firmly. We have to move. Liara's lips parted, doubt clear on her face. I can't. I can barely stand, she whispered. Daniel crouched beside her, his voice steady but sharp. Then I'll carry you again, but we're not waiting to be found. She hesitated, her gaze locked on his, searching for weakness, for hesitation. But she found none, only determination, stronger than the steel walls around them. Slowly she nodded. All right, I'll trust you. The words were soft, almost fragile, but they lit a fire in Daniel's chest. He helped her to her feet, her body trembling as she leaned against him. Her weight was light, but every step made her wince. Daniel wrapped his arm around her waist, steadying her. Stay close, don't make a sound, he whispered. Together they crept toward the bunker's exit, the cold air seeping through the cracks. Outside, the ruins were painted silver by the pale light of a dying moon. Smoke drifted across the battlefield, shadows of broken machines stretching across the ground. The air was silent except for the distant rumble of patrols. Daniel scanned the horizon, spotting a line of jagged hills to the east. If we reach the caves there, we can hide, he muttered, more to himself than to her. Liara clung to his side, her breathing shallow, her eyes scanning the shadows as if ghosts of war might rise at any moment. They moved slowly, slipping between broken walls and shattered towers. Every sound of boots or engines made Daniel freeze, pressing her against rubble until danger passed. At one point, a human patrol passed so close he could see the glow of their visors. His heart pounded. his finger hovering near the trigger, but Liara pressed her trembling hand against his arm. Silently begging him not to fire, he held still, his breath shallow until the patrol faded into the mist. When they finally reached the hills, Daniel found a narrow path winding upward, half hidden by fallen stones. The climb was rough, every step a battle for Liara. She stumbled more than once, her leg too weak to carry her weight. Each time she fell, Daniel caught her, lifting her in his arms and pressing forward. "Why do you keep doing this?" she whispered once, her voice breaking with exhaustion. Daniel didn't slow, didn't look at her. "Because I said I would," he answered simply. Her eyes shimmered, as if his words struck something deep inside her. At last, they reached the mouth of a cave, dark and silent. Daniel guided her inside, laying her gently against the stone wall. The air was cool, the ground damp, but it was safe, at least for now. He sat beside her, his chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face. Liara watched him in silence for a long moment. Finally, she whispered, "You're not like the others, Daniel. You fight, but you protect. You kill, but you heal." Daniel gave a faint, tired smile. "I don't know what I am anymore." Her lips curved into a fragile smile. "Maybe something better." As the night deepened, Daniel built a small fire from broken wood and scraps, its glow flickering against the cave walls. He handed her more rations, insisting she eat even when she protested. When she shivered, he moved closer, wrapping part of his cloak around her. At first she tensed, her body stiff against his side, but slowly she relaxed, leaning her head against his shoulder. The warmth of her presence surprised him, but he didn't move. For the first time since the war began, the silence between them felt peaceful. Liara's voice broke it at last, soft and hesitant. "I thought humans were heartless monsters," she confessed. "But you risked your life again and again. For me. Why?" Daniel stared into the fire, his jaw tight. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe because I'm tired of this war. Tired of killing. Tired of being told who deserves to live and who deserves to die. You needed help, so I helped. That's all." Liara turned her face toward him, her violet eyes glistening in the firelight. "To me, it is not small. It is everything," she whispered. For a long while they sat in silence, the fire crackling softly. Daniel's arm rested protectively around her shoulders, her head still leaning against him. Somewhere deep inside, he felt a strange pull, something stronger than duty, stronger than survival. It was fragile, dangerous, but real. When the fire burned low, Liara's breathing slowed, her body relaxing into sleep. Daniel stayed awake, watching the cave entrance, his rifle across his knees. Yet his eyes often drifted to her, her face calm for the first time since he found her. And in the quiet of that cave, he realized something terrifying and undeniable. He wasn't just protecting her anymore, he needed her too. Outside, the war raged on, but inside the cave, a bond was forming. One built not on orders or blood, but on trust, sacrifice, and something far more dangerous than either of them had expected. The cave was silent, the faint crackle of dying embers the only sound. Daniel sat near the entrance, his rifle steady across his knees, his eyes heavy from sleepless nights. Liara slept deeper inside, her breathing calm, her silver hair glowing faintly in the darkness. For a moment, Daniel allowed himself to believe they were safe. But safety never lasted long in war. The sound came first. Metal scraping on stone, boots crunching over gravel. Daniel's body stiffened, his grip tightening on the rifle. Voices followed, sharp and guttural, echoing through the valley. Patrols, and too close. He turned, hissing, softly. "Liara, wake up." Her eyes fluttered open, confusion flashing across her face before fear returned. "They've found us?" she whispered. "Not yet," he said, his voice low but firm. But they will if we don't move. He pulled out the faint glow stick, crushing it in his hand and letting its weak light guide them deeper into the cave. The air grew damp and cold, water dripping from the stone ceiling. Liara leaned against him, her steps unsteady, her wounded leg slowing her down. Faster, Daniel urged, his eyes scanning the twisting tunnels. Behind them, the voices grew louder, closer. Then the first beam of light cut across the cave wall. A shout followed, angry and sharp. Daniel cursed, pulling Liara into the shadows. Blaster fire seared through. The air lighting the cave in bursts of red, stone shattered, sparks flying. Liara cried out, clinging to his arm. Daniel raised his rifle and fired back, the shots echoing like thunder in the enclosed space. One enemy soldier fell, another ducked behind the rocks. The fight had begun. "Stay behind me," Daniel growled, pushing Liara back against the wall. His shots were precise, each one meant to buy time, not victory. But his weapon was nearly drained, its energy core. Blinking red, when the last shot left the barrel, the rifle clicked empty, useless. Daniel threw it aside and pulled the combat blade from his belt. The shadows moved as two alien soldiers rushed him, their armor gleaming, their weapons raised. Daniel met them head-on, his blade flashing in the dim light. He ducked under the first swing, driving his knife into the soldier's side, twisting, hard. The enemy screamed, collapsing. The second soldier struck, the butt of his weapon slamming into Daniel's chest, knocking the air from his lungs. Daniel stumbled but didn't fall. He roared, his fist smashing into the soldier's jaw, the sound of cracking bone echoing in the cave. The soldier dropped, blood staining the stone floor. Liara watched with wide, terrified eyes. She had seen warriors fight before, but never like this. Daniel fought not with orders or training, but with sheer will. Every move screamed of survival, of a man who refused to fall. It shook her to the core, but more voices echoed from the tunnel. More soldiers, their footsteps growing louder. Daniel's chest heaved, his blade dripping with blood. "We can't fight them all," he said, his voice ragged. "We run." He grabbed Liara's hand and pulled her deeper into the winding cave. Their steps splashed in cold water, their breaths loud in the silence. The tunnel narrowed, rocks scraping Daniel's shoulders as they squeezed through. At last, they stumbled into a wide chamber lit by cracks in the ceiling, moonlight spilling in like silver fire. Daniel stopped, his ears straining. The voices were gone for now. He let out a heavy breath, lowering Liara against a rock. Her body trembled, her face pale. "You fought like a beast," she whispered, her voice shaking. Daniel wiped the blood from his blade, his eyes hard. "I fought because I had to. Because if I didn't, you'd be dead." Her violet eyes softened, shimmering with something more than fear. "No," she whispered, her lips trembling. "You fought because you chose me." Daniel froze, her words cutting deeper than any blade. He wanted to deny it, to say it was only survival, but he couldn't, because in that moment, he knew she was right. Every decision, every risk, he hadn't taken them for duty, he had taken them for her. The chamber shook suddenly, dust raining from above. The soldiers were back, their voices echoing through the tunnels again. Daniel clenched his jaw, lifting her back to her feet. "We keep moving," he said firmly. She nodded weakly, gripping his hand tighter. This time, she didn't look at him with fear. She looked at him with trust, complete and unshaken. Together, they disappeared into the deeper dark of the caves, the enemy behind them, the unknown ahead of them. And between them, a bond forged in blood, fire, and choice. Stronger now than either of them dared admit. The caves opened at last into the outside world. Daniel stepped out first, his eyes scanning the jagged cliffs that rose like teeth under the pale dawn sky. The war had left its scars here too. Burned trees, shattered rocks, smoke drifting from distant fields. Behind him, Liara leaned against the stone, her breath shallow, her body trembling with exhaustion. But her violet eyes were alive, steady, and unafraid. For days they had run, hiding from both humans and aliens. Every path felt like a trap, every sound a warning. But now, for the first time, they stood under open sky together. Daniel's chest rose and fell with relief. Though his hand never left the hilt of his blade, Liara stepped closer, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her voice was soft but filled with weight. "They will not stop," she whispered. "My people will come for me. Your people too. Neither side will forgive what you've done." Daniel looked at her, his jaw tense. "I don't care about forgiveness," he said. "I care about keeping you alive." Her eyes softened, shimmering with emotion. "You don't understand," she said, her hand pressing against her chest. "If I return to my people, they will chain me with duty. If I go to yours, they will call me a prisoner. Either way, I lose myself." Daniel turned, gazing out at the ruined horizon. "Then maybe it's time you choose for yourself," he said, his voice firm but quiet. She blinked, her lips parting, as though no one had ever given her that choice before. "I've always been told what I must be," she whispered. "A daughter of House Velith, a symbol, a prize. Never. Just Liara." Before Daniel could reply, a sharp whistle split the air. He spun, pulling her back as a squad of soldiers crested the ridge. Not aliens this time. Humans, their armor gleaming, their rifles aimed. At their head stood Captain Hale, Daniel's commanding officer. His voice carried across the rocks, harsh and accusing. "Sergeant Cole, step away from the alien." Daniel's chest tightened, his rifle heavy in his hands. He could see the soldier's eyes, cold and ready to fire. Behind him, Liara stiffened, her body trembling. "This is it," she whispered. "Your people demand you choose." Daniel raised his hand slightly, his voice steady. "She's not a threat, Captain. She's injured. She needs protection." Captain Hale's jaw tightened, his glare sharp. "Protection? She's the daughter of a noble house, Cole. She's worth more dead than alive. Don't tell me you've gone soft." The words hit like knives, but Daniel stood his ground. "No," he said, his voice low but firm. "I've gone human." The silence stretched for a heartbeat. Then Hale's face twisted with disgust. "You've betrayed us," he spat, raising his rifle. "You've chosen her over your own kind." Before Daniel could move, another sound filled the air. The hum of alien engines, sleek ships rising over the cliffs, dozens of armored figures descended, their weapons gleaming in the sunlight. Liara's people had come. Their leader, tall and regal, stepped forward, his voice sharp in their tongue. "Return her, human. She belongs to us." Liara's breath caught, her eyes wide with fear. She took a step back, closer to Daniel, her voice breaking. "No, I will not go with them. Not like this." Her people called her name, their voices filled with command, not care. Her people saw her as bloodline, as power, not as herself. Now both sides stood with weapons raised, humans on one ridge, aliens on the other, and between them Daniel and Liara alone. The air trembled with tension, one spark away from war. Liara's hand slipped into Daniel's, her voice trembling but strong. "Daniel, what do we do?" He looked at her, seeing the fear, the strength, the defiance in her violet eyes, and in that moment he knew the choice wasn't his alone. It was theirs. He tightened his grip, turning to face both armies. "She's not your prisoner," he shouted, his voice echoing across the cliffs. "She's not your symbol, she's not your prize. She is Liara, and she chooses her own path." The soldiers stirred, whispers spreading like fire. Liara's heart pounded, her chest rising. With sudden courage, she stepped forward, her voice clear, her tone cutting like a blade. "I am not the weapon of House Velith. I am not the trophy of humans. I am Liara, and I stand with the one who carried me when no one else would. I stand with him." The declaration hung heavy in the air. The soldiers on both sides hesitated, unsure, unsettled by her defiance. Daniel pulled her close, his body tense, ready for the first shot. He whispered near her ear, "Whatever happens next, we face it, together." Liara closed her eyes, her hand tightening on his. "Yes, together." The two armies stared, divided not by weapons but by the courage of one human and one alien who dared to choose each other. And in that fragile silence, a new battle began, not of fire but of hearts. A choice that would echo far beyond the cliffs. The cliffs held silence, heavy and sharp like a blade. Two armies stood frozen, weapons raised but unmoving. Between them, Daniel and Liara held hands, their shadows stretching long under the pale morning light. No one fired the first shot. Perhaps it was the weight of Liara's voice. Perhaps it was the unshaken defiance in Daniel's stance. Or perhaps, deep down, even soldiers tired of endless killing. Whatever the reason, both sides hesitated, waiting, watching. Captain Hale's face twisted with rage, his voice cutting through the air. You think you can change the war with one alien girl? With your betrayal? Daniel tightened his grip on Liara's hand, his jaw hard. I'm not changing the war, he said, his voice steady. I'm ending it. For us, for her, for what comes next, the alien commander shouted, his words filled with fury. You dare claim her? She is heir to Velith. She belongs to her people. Liara stepped forward, her violet eyes blazing. No. I belong to no one. I belong to myself. And I choose him. Her words struck like thunder, echoing across the cliffs. The soldiers of both sides shifted uneasily, glances passing between them. Daniel could see it, the doubt, the cracks forming in the walls of loyalty. For the first time they saw her not as a symbol, but as a living soul who had chosen freedom. Captain Hale raised his weapon, his anger boiling over. Then you'll both die traitors. His finger tightened on the trigger. But before the shot could fire, another voice rang out, Enough! It came not from soldier or commander, but from one of the younger recruits, a human barely more than a boy, his rifle trembling in his hands. He looked between Daniel and Liara, his eyes wide with something other than hate. They're not enemies, the boy whispered, his voice shaking. They're something else. His words spread like a spark through dry grass. More soldiers lowered their weapons, both human and alien. One by one, the line of rifles wavered, until the cliffside was no longer a wall of death, but a field of hesitation. Hale cursed, his fury boiling, but he was suddenly outnumbered by his own men. Daniel stepped forward, his voice calm but strong. You can keep fighting and more will die. Or you can let this moment mean something. The alien commander glared, torn between rage and uncertainty. But Liara's presence silenced him. The weight of her bloodline, her defiance, her choice. For the first time, he lowered his weapon. Reluctant, bitter, but yielding, the armies slowly dispersed, retreating into the mist of dawn. No treaty was signed, no war ended that day, but something had shifted, something neither generals nor politicians could undo. The seed of change had been planted. Weeks later, far from the battlefield, Daniel and Liara found refuge in a quiet valley untouched by war. A small cottage stood near a river, its walls simple but strong. Here, no one hunted them. No one commanded. Them, for the first time, they lived not as soldier and fugitive, but as man and woman. Liara's wounds healed slowly, her strength returning day by day. Daniel worked the land, hunted for food, repaired the roof when storms broke it. In the evenings, they sat together under the stars, speaking of futures neither of them had dared to imagine. It was here that Liara finally revealed the truth she had carried since the bunker, her hand resting gently on her stomach, her violet eyes soft with both fear and joy. Daniel, she whispered, it is not only my bloodline that made me a prize. It is the life inside me. I carry your child. Daniel froze, his breath caught in his chest. His mind reeled, memories flooding back. The night in the cave, the moments of closeness when fear blurred into something deeper. Shock, fear, and awe battled in his heart. But when his gaze met hers, trembling and uncertain, he saw no regret, only hope. Slowly, he knelt before her, his hand resting gently over hers. A faint smile touched his lips. Then we don't just fight for us anymore, he whispered. We fight for our child. Liara's eyes filled with tears, her body shaking as she leaned into him. For the first time, the future did not look like chains or death. It looked like life. Fragile, but real. Months passed, and the seasons turned. The war still raged in distant lands. But here in the valley, new life grew. The river flowed clear. The fields bloomed with wild flowers. And one quiet morning, the cries of a newborn filled the cottage. Daniel held the child in his arms, his hands trembling not with fear but with awe. The baby's eyes opened, violet with flecks of human green. A bridge between two worlds, Layara, pale but smiling, reached for them, her hand resting over Daniel's. "He is proof," she whispered, her voice weak but full of love. "Proof that we can be more than war." Daniel kissed her forehead, his voice steady. "He's not just proof," he said, gazing down at their child. "He's the future." Outside, the sun rose, golden light spilling across the valley. The war had not ended. The galaxy had not changed overnight. But in that small cottage, in the arms of one human and one alien girl, hope was born. And sometimes hope was enough to begin a new world.